What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, we are surrounded by seedlings. We're downstairs in the grow room, and we have all of our seedlings starting to sprout for this year's garden, and I'm so excited. They're just starting to germinate, and we're getting such great results, and I cannot wait to see all the plants up and growing. But the reason why I brought you guys down here today, because it's actually a beautiful day outside. I've got some other content planned for you all, but I wanted to bring you guys down here to talk about something that is really important when it comes to having a successful garden, and that's having the confidence in order to thin. Having the confidence to thin your plants is something that can really make or break your garden. And for a lot of beginning gardeners, myself included, I really struggled with this, and I did not have the confidence to kind of be a cutthroat gardener. This was the term that was actually used by one of our viewers on our Facebook page. They said, "I want to learn how to be a cutthroat gardener when it comes to thinning." And I thought, that's a really good way to put it, because you do have to be kind of cutthroat when it comes to thinning. Obviously, it's never fun to do. I don't find joy in doing it, but the benefit and reward of doing it is so much greater than leaving them all to just grow at their own devices. So I really want to show you guys how to thin, how I thin, and my reasoning for doing it the way that I do, because not everything needs to be thinned exactly the same way. There are certain things that follow a very specific rule. Other things follow a more loose rule. And I want to share those with you because it can translate to growing more food in less space. Not everything is black and white. And so that's why I want to kind of, like I said, I want to bring you down here, talk about it. When it comes to thinning, what you're essentially doing is you're selecting the strongest and healthiest plant to survive. You are thinning or culling the amount of plants in a given space so that the strongest and kind of the fittest will survive, so that you're eventually going to have a very strong, healthy producing plant. That's the idea behind it. Thinning also will conserve resources, whether it's space, whether it's nutrients, water, soil, even airflow can be a resource. Sunlight, another very precious resource, or grow light is another very precious resource. And so when you have these resources, they're finite. There's only so many of them in a given space. And so you have plants that are competing for those resources. And so when you have competition, it's not a zero-sum game. The problem is usually a lose-lose situation. Neither will do as good as had there been just one or a few in a given area. And that's what we'll get to, is kind of how many plants can be sustained in a certain area, because that's kind of what thinning is all about, is taking that area that can host the most amount of life and really allowing that to be your guide. Because not everything is going to be the same. Like I said, tomatoes are so much different than corn, and corn is so much different than lettuce, which is so much different than beets. When it comes to the back of a seed packet, a lot of people get concerned when it comes to plant spacing and think that that is how far they need to be thinning their plants. When you are starting your stuff in seedling trays, you're going to be far more aggressive with your thinning, because your plants are literally growing right on top of each other. If you're sowing seeds directly in the garden, there's quite a bit more forgiveness there. And I don't want to get you hung up on thinning outside versus thinning inside, because thinning inside is going to be dictated by the container size that you're growing in. So for us, we're growing in a 2-inch by 2-inch square, or a 6-cell pack. That's our growable space. And so ideally, with the start that we're going to move out into the garden, we want one, maybe no more than 3 plants in that given space, and that will be defined by what we're growing. If it's an herb, we're going to grow more plants in that small space because they can grow closer together. But if it's something like a tomato or a pepper or a bean or a zucchini, big plants that get really large, we want to isolate that to a single plant, because that's one plant in 4 square inches. You can't host 2 plants in 4 square inches that are really large, they grow really fast, they're nutrient hogs, and then their fully mature size. You have to remember, their fully mature size is so much bigger. When comparing that to, say, an herb like thyme or parsley, or even things like beets or bunching onions, the rule does not necessarily follow exactly, because of the fact that they're so much different. Like I said, they're not black and white.
All right, so with things like peas you want to thin to one plant per cell. As you can see, we have 2 plants here. And so what we want to do when it comes to thinning, if you want one plant and you have 2, what are we going to do? What's our criteria? What are we looking for? Well, we're looking for the height of the plant, the stockiness of the plant, the vigor of the plant. A plant that is lower to the ground and looks more lush and green is better than a plant that's very tall, very spindly, and yellow. So just because it's bigger does not mean that it's healthier. And so what we want to do in this instance here is we want to thin out the smaller one. The smaller one is a whole lot more feeble. It's the same color. It's it's just smaller. And so this is really going to compete against this one here that's trying to grow. So what I want to do is I want to come in here and I want to give this a pinch. So I'm just going to pinch it with my nails until it breaks off there. So we've got one plant, and that's selected for this space here. Now when it comes to herbs, this is cilantro. Cilantro can be grown in what's called multi-sowing. Now when you multi-sow, you can grow in clusters. See how we have clusters of 2 and clusters of 2, clusters of 2 and clusters of 2. These plants grow very well together because they don't crowd themselves out. These can be grown closely together, and this spacing right here is great. We're looking for about, in herbs just cilantro is a good example. Parsley is another example. There's lots that are like this. But you're looking for about 1.5 inches spacing in between each other, because then as they grow, they're just going to kind of grow up as a lush clump. Now, with crops like onions, this is another really good example of a multi-sowing. You see, these here, there's probably 20, 30 plants in this tiny little space here. But they're not going to be planted out into the garden like this. This is only temporary. Once we get them out in the garden, we're actually going to divide each plant up individually. These, we're not going to take the whole block of soil and move the whole block of soil into the garden. We're actually going to break the block up. We have videos on how we do this. And we actually break the block up and untangle the roots and then plant each plant in the garden individually. Onions are really the only crop you can get away with that. All the other crops, you'll damage the root systems, you'll stress the plants out, and really set back growth. But with onions, you can plant a lot of plants in a small amount of space in what's called multi-sowing, and that allows you to really take advantage of this system here. Now you don't have to thin these. Again, you don't have to thin these because you are going to space them out when you move them out into the garden. Tomatoes, we have 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. You'll notice they're all thinned. If we had more than one growing, what would be our criteria? It'd be the same as the peas. We would look for, are the leaves yellow? Are they smaller? Are they spindlier? Just look for different traits that tell you which plant of the 2 or 3 you're going to select from, which one's the healthiest, which one has the most vigor, because you want to select the ones that are going to obviously be the strongest and the fittest, so they're going to produce more for you. Now with crops like arugula. Arugula is another great crop that can be multi-sowed. With arugula, you can grow 2 or 3 plants in a small space like we have here. And we don't need to thin these because they're leafy greens. They're going to grow up as a leafy green, and so you don't have to worry too much about thinning those. When it comes to a crop like beets, beets are ones that we're going to thin, but we also can multi-sow. And where that kind of comes in is because these are root vegetables. These are going to form a little ball. And those balls need to be spaced out far enough apart so that when they're fully mature, they're not crowding themselves out. Prime example is in this 4-inch by 4-inch square here. We have 1, 2, 3 plants. That's how many you want in a 4-inch by 4-inch square. You want about 1-inch spacing per plant, because when they grow up, they're actually going to push out and force themselves outward, so they're still going to mature and they're still going to grow and they won't crowd themselves out. With this example here, you'll notice we have 1 plant and 2 plants right on top of each other. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at these plants. These leaves are far smaller. It's actually far taller of a plant. it does not look as stocky, so I'm going to select this one to pull out. With this one here, we got quite a few seedlings here. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I only can have 3 in this space. So I have one plant here. I have one plant in the middle. Because it's in the middle, it's not very good spacing. Even if it's healthier, it's not actually going to be better for the whole. Then I have a plant here and a plant here. I'm going to take this one here because it's ultimately going to give me good spacing. And then I'm going to take this one because it's right on the edge there. So I have 1, 2, 3.
So now that I showed you kind of my reasoning for how I thin and what I thin, I want to talk about a question that's raised, and that's, Luke, how do I know when is the best time to thin? The best time to thin is as soon as you are confident that what you are leaving is going to survive. So again, I'll say that because it's very important. It's probably the biggest takeaway from the video that I want you guys to take away is that the timing is everything, but the timing is only as good as your confidence is. For me, I know what to look for, and I'm very confident in my growing abilities that if I thin as soon as these plants sprout, that I'm not going to necessarily thin too early. And where I'm getting at is a mistake that I see way too many gardeners making is thinning too early. If you don't know what you're looking for, or you don't necessarily know how to grow seedlings successfully, you can make mistakes along the way that can be very costly, as in you can accidentally kill your seedlings. And so what I don't want to see you guys do is I don't want to see you have 2 seedlings sprout. You pick one of the 2, you clip it, you're down to 1 seedling, and then something happens to that 1 seedling because you clipped it too early. And now you have no seedlings, and basically you're back at square one. You have to restart rather than just wait a little bit. If you wait, often what happens is the strengths kind of show themselves. Any mistakes that you might make, you're going to have some forgiveness there because there's 2 plants rather than 1. And there's not a whole lot of crowding issues right off the bat, right away anyways, because when the seedlings first sprout, people often just jump to thinning right away. And you can, if you're confident like I am, you can thin right away. There's nothing wrong with it. It just saves time and is a whole lot quicker because you can kind of pull them out rather than having to use snips when the root system gets really established. We'll get into that in a second, what you don't want to do. But rather than pulling them out, you have to snip them. And so I can pull them out when they're really young, which makes thinning a whole lot faster. Now, that also leads me into the next thing that I was going to talk about, the next mistake that I see people making, and that's they wait until they have adult leaves and then they start pulling the seedlings out. You do not want to do that. If you start pulling seedlings out just by ripping them out, if 2 plants are planted closely together and they start to get an advanced root system, the roots can actually get tangled around each other, and when you pull one out, you can sometimes pull all of them out. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. If you did, make sure to throw a like up there. It helps spread this video around. And also, let me know in the comments box below if this really helped you. I really want to know if these videos are helping people because it helps gauge kind of where my audience is at, what you guys are wanting to see. And if this is too basic for you, let me know. I want to see kind of where you guys are at, if you're enjoying these videos or not. So just let me know in the comments box below. I would really appreciate it. And again, I have tons more content coming out in the very near future, and we're gonna be outside, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you're not yet already, and we'll catch you all on the next video. All right, go big or go home, everyone. See ya. Bye.